You ever play the Florida Man game? You know what I'm talking about? We did this in my small group a couple weeks ago. And by the way, if you're not connected to a group here at CCV, I want to encourage you to talk to someone out of Connection Central about getting in a group. Because it's one of those ways that a large church can feel smaller and make this place feel more like home. If you've been here a bit and you're still looking for that feeling, consider getting into a group. So what we did is we pulled out our phones, we opened a Google app, and we put in our birthday. Now, we started with our birthday, just the month and the day, not the year. And then we typed the words, Florida Man. And lots of wild stuff in these news reports came up about these wild, crazy things that Florida people do. And I can attest to this. I lived in Florida for about 4 years before coming back here to CCV. And there's some strange people in Florida, let me tell you. Let me give you an example here. Florida man smashes a window. Why did this guy bust a window when he was angry? Listen to this. Dustin Tyrell was at a Wendy's restaurant when he reportedly grabbed a grapefruit-sized rock and shattered one of the Wendy's restaurant windows, according to police. When a passerby asked Tyrell why he did it, he shouted, "They don't serve Cinnabons anymore." They don't serve Cinnabons at Wendy's, in case you didn't know. Now, here's another one. Angry man dumps dirt on girlfriend's ride. How and why did he dump dirt on her car? Here's what the newspaper said. This is from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. Hunter Mills, of 20, from Crestview, Florida, in Florida's Panhandle, was probably forlorn or worse on Thursday when he asked his girlfriend to meet him on a local road to talk. She drove up to meet him in a white 2010 Cadillac sedan, and according to the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, after she refused to answer his questions, the defendant used a front-end loader with a full bucket of dirt and dumped it on the roof of the driver's side of her car. She wasn't hurt, but because the car's windows were open, the dirt went everywhere, filled up the car vents, the center console, the windows, everywhere. Here's a photo that the newspaper posted of her car. Look at this. Problem? Yes. Yes, that's a problem. Bigger problem is the car didn't even belong to her. She borrowed it from a friend. Can you imagine getting your car back with it looking like that? People do all sorts of wild and crazy things when they're angry. But let's be honest with ourselves this morning and with each other. We do some pretty dumb things when we're angry too. We all do. And the scriptures tell us that Solomon, King Solomon of Israel, was one of the wisest men to ever live. And some of that wisdom is recorded for us in the book of Proverbs. And tell me if you, be thinking if you agree or disagree with this statement I'm going to show you from Solomon regarding anger. Proverbs 14, he says, "The quick-tempered do what? Quick-tempered do foolish things, and those who devise evil schemes are hated." Speaking of foolish things, did you do any dumb things when you were a kid? How many of you liked fireworks as a kid? I loved fireworks as a kid, but it always seemed like the kids in our neighborhood all had way cooler fireworks when it came close to summer and the 4th of July than we did as kids. We were that family where the kids would stand out on the edge of the driveway with sparklers. All the rest of the kids had the cooler stuff, except this one summer. This one summer, I got out of town with a group from our church. We went on this trip in June, and we went down to Missouri for this big event, and I bought a bunch of fireworks back with me. And among those fireworks were M80s. Now, if you don't know what an M80 is, the M80, this is a picture of an M80. It's about 1.5 inches long and about 1/2 inch in diameter. And this particular model was one of the ones that we had, and it had a fuse coming out of the size of the M80. And they were originally designed to be military gunfire simulators. That's what was the original purpose of the M80. And we had a bunch of them. I had a bag full of them. And I was with my brothers, Dave and Pete. Here's a picture of me and my brothers about this age. I was about 12 years old in this. And man, I wish I still had that hair. But where we lined the M80s up across the street from our house. We didn't want to be too close to the window for Mom to hear. Line it up across the street from the house, and we just line up all these M80s in a perfect row. And my buddy Jason, he grabs the Bic lighter that he took from his house, and he goes down to light an M80 right away. Bang! And Jason screams, "Ah!" he almost blew his finger off. The tip of his finger, he was screaming and shaking his hand. And what we didn't realize is the one he went to light first had a shorter fuse than the rest of them. Short fuses, especially on fireworks, can hurt people, but let's be real again to get together. Short fuses in life, with our temper. When we say we have a short fuse, we can hurt people. We explode and cause all sorts of damage in our relationships. People get hurt. That's why we're starting this series called Deal With It. Because often when we get angry, we want to tell other people to deal with it, don't we? We want to say, you deal with it. That's how I feel, deal with it. That's what we want to say to each other, don't we? But instead, I want you to consider this. Maybe we should be the ones who need to consider dealing with it before we let our short fuses hurt others in our lives. How often does your anger get the best of you? How often does this happen for you in your life? Maybe you've gotten a little bit ticked off at a family member recently and let loose on a friend or a close loved one because of your frustration, your short fuse. Or maybe you're already thinking about the people that you're going to see in the coming weeks as we talked about, the holidays are approaching and you might be around some people you don't necessarily care to see, and you could already feel the emotions inside you beginning to stir. What is this thing that we call anger? And you know what? Psychologists and psychiatrists alike believe it to be quite a baffling emotion. Gary Collins, who's a clinical psychologist from Purdue University, he says this regarding anger. He says, when you begin to learn anything about anger, you learn how mysterious and complex it really is. Why is it that some people get angry over the smallest things? And other people could have these major disasters happen in their lives, and their relationships go south, and they seem to have a longer fuse than everyone else. Why is that? Is it genetics? Is it their upbringing and their environment when they were a kid? Is it just the luck of the draw? Is it a combination of all of that? How come some people get more angry than others, and other people seem to have longer fuses? And why is that? I mean, are you even aware of what anger does to your body? What happens to your insides when you feel that boiling anger just start to build up in you? Adrenaline begins to rapidly pump into your bloodstream. Your heart beats more rapidly. Your blood pressure can climb as much as 60 points. Your heart begins to beat faster, and your digestive process all come to a screeching halt. Your salivary glands actually stop producing saliva when you get filled with anger. And your liver begins to pump sugar into your bloodstream. And you start breathing faster, and you start sweating. And your blood vessels expand, and people see that angry vein in your neck or in your head. Anger doesn't just impact the way that we think, it impacts the way we physically feel and contributes further to the emotions that we express when we're angry. Many of you know I was in the Air Force. And for a couple of years of my enlistment, I worked in this weapons storage area. It was a completely secure area with cameras. We were armed to the hilt with all sorts of weapons. We had 15 armed personnel that could respond anywhere on site within a matter of 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And we would search everything before it entered that secure area, because it was where we stored all of our nuclear warheads. We had to search every piece of clothing, every pocket, every vehicle, every bag that went through those gates. What were we looking for? Mostly weapons and explosives. And so when I think about having a short fuse, my mind goes right back there. And I want you to follow me this morning, because I think the way we manage our anger can very closely be tied to the types of fuses and detonators on bombs that we look for, much like the ones that our soldiers are still looking for, IEDs, in the Middle East today. And so as I work my way through this list, I want you to think which one is more closely aligned with you and the way that you manage your anger. The first one is this. It's called a time fuse. Now, time fuses don't necessarily do damage right away. They sit for a period of time and then explode a little bit later because what time fuses do is they sit on it and wait before the explosion. And some people manage their anger that way. Some people bury their anger before they explode. And after burying it for so long, then finally they let loose and they cause all sorts of relational damage. But they bury it deep. And sometimes when you'll see them, you'll see a little bit of body language out of them first with the way that they're walking or carrying their head. And you'll ask them, hey, you don't seem right. What's wrong? Nothing. No, I could tell something's bothering. I'm okay. No, really. You seem upset by something. I'm fine. Right? You know, I hear you laughing. Some people, you quit nudging the person next to you. Is that how you deal with anger? Are you the time fuse? See, these folks, they bury it and they don't want to deal with it. And friends, when we bury our anger, it's like burying toxic waste. We'll hear about these communities in the news from time to time, that some corporation or maybe even the government. I remember seeing a news report a number of years ago about a community in Washington State where there is this toxic dump next to this community just outside the city limits, and then what happens? It leaks and it gets into the water table, and then people start fearing about drinking their own drinking water in their house, and all sorts of people start getting sick. And friends, that's what happens when we bury our anger. It leaks like toxic waste. It'll poison your mind and your thoughts and your heart and your friendships and your attitude, and eventually to the point where it can poison your very soul. Again, Solomon's wisdom that we're looking at this morning talks about this. He says, each heart knows its own bitterness. Its own what? Stuffed down, unresolved anger. That's what bitterness is. And what happens as a result of that stuffed down anger? When we don't resolve it, when we just sit in that bitterness, we can't experience joy. That's what Solomon's talking about here. The consequence of burying your anger is that your heart can no longer share joy with others in your life because you're stuck in your own unresolved anger. Are you the time fuse? Just waiting on your anger? Or maybe you're not the time fuse, maybe you're the contact detonator. Here's what this type of person does when they deal with their anger. This person, as soon as they hit their situation or a person, they explode on impact. They let loose. It's like a mushroom cloud of anger, destroying everything in their path. And they don't even stop to think about the emotion. They don't even stop to think about what their anger is doing to others. They just consume it with everyone. And they don't stop to think about why they're angry. They just explode all over everyone, taking out everything in their path. And here's the thing is, when they let loose, do they feel better? No. You just watch them get more and more angry. Because here's the thing about dealing with anger this way, like the contact detonator. Your anger just leads to more anger. And you can't satisfy anger with more anger. You can't satisfy rage with more rage. Solomon's wisdom says this on this. Look at Proverbs 39 up on the screen. Fools give full vent to their rage. They just let loose. But the wise, what should the wise do? They bring calm. When a contact detonator type goes off, that anger bomb causes all sorts of relational damage. And they pay a high price. And if you're that type of person and you're here this morning, you know what that high price is. It's way too high. Solomon talks about the price we pay when we let our anger go like this. Look at Proverbs 14 up on the screen. It says, whoever brings ruin on their family will only what? Inherit what? The wind. When we let these anger bombs go off like this, people don't want to be around that. And eventually you find yourself alone. Some of you who are that type might be sitting here this morning thinking, man, I wish I had that wisdom long ago, before I lost everything. So maybe you're the contact detonator, or maybe you're this next type of fuse. This is a proximity fuse. Now, proximity fuse goes off when it's within a certain distance of its target. They will use all sorts of tools to get the explosive device to the target, and when it's within that certain distance, it blows. This type of angry person has an intentional target. They're going after someone quite specific, and they'll use radar, sonar, infrared cameras. They want justice because someone violated their rules, and they're going to hunt them down. It was a violation of justice that occurred. So they start planning their attack. These people are very specific about letting their anger loose on their target. One target, they'll hunt them down. And they'll start digging up all sorts of data, too. They're like a private investigator. They start bringing out reports from the past 10, 15, 20 years old. They keep great records. It's like they got spreadsheets of people who have ticked them off and how. And they'll go after them. It's like when someone shows, when something's missing in the house, this person will say, "Where's my hammer? Where is it? You know the rules in this house. You have to ask permission before you take my stuff, and then put it back where you found it. And I come to find my stuff. It's not here. Where is it?" And then search warrants get distributed throughout the house, and they set up the interrogation lamps in the family room. Where's my stuff? It's funny, the craziest, smallest things that set us off sometimes too. Like a borrowed shirt that wasn't returned, or a dirty car, or misplaced keys. And sometimes we're the ones who forgot where they were. No one else took them. It was our own fault. Is that you? Listen to Solomon's wisdom on this one. He says, it is to one's honor to what? It is to one's honor to avoid strife. But every fool is so quick to quarrel. Are you the one looking for a fight? Are you the proximity fuse? And sometimes people think that you are searching for an argument. Is that you? Or maybe you're not that one. Maybe you're the remote detonator. Here's the last one. The remote detonator. These are some of the most deadly because these folks, they don't necessarily want to flat out destroy someone or a relationship for that matter, but they want to make sure that others know that they're angry. And so they'll kind of hang around and quietly drop their bombs and then disappear. These people show up, explode, and then they're gone because they don't want to deal with the relational damage. They just want to drop their bomb and leave, just cause a little bit of hurt, just a little bit of a sting. Because that's what it is with the remote detonator. You don't have to be physically present when the damage happens. You could be at a distance. This is the kind of person who will drop that little sarcasm bomb and then leave the room. And they'll say something like, "See you later, Your Majesty," and boom, slam the door behind them, and they're gone. Is that you? They don't want to deal with the hurt, but they want the little bit of hurt to occur so people get their point. Here's what Solomon says about this. He talks about this in Proverbs 17. He says, the start of a quarrel, start of a fight, what's that like? It's like just a small leak in a dam. Picture a dam, and then it has this small leak. And Solomon's saying, look, you need to stop that leak before a dispute breaks out. Because people who manage their anger this way and they just cause these little leaks in their relationship, eventually you're going to erode that dam so much that it's not going to be able to hold it back anymore. And a flood will take out everything. And everybody drowns, and then your relationships are gone. Friends, the way that we manage our anger or neglect to manage our anger or the way that we use anger as a tool to hurt can leave us with nothing. So how do we deal with this? How do we manage this challenge with anger. The first thing I want to propose is this. This is the first of 4 things I want to suggest you can do to better manage your anger. The first thing is this, and it sounds quite elementary, but get God involved. That's number 1. Get God involved. And I know that sounds elementary, but here's what I want you to consider regarding this. When was the last time? This is why it's important. Be intentional. When was the last time you actually stopped in your tracks when you got frustrated right before you let loose and said, God, you know what? Help me not to do something foolish here. When's the last time you invited God into that space of your anger? You know, some people say count to 10 when you're angry, right? Actually comes from Thomas Jefferson. Look at what he said about this. When angry, count to 10 before you speak. If you're really angry, 100. But it's true. Psychologists have looked into this principle and found that it's helpful. Dan Johnston from Mercer University, he says this, he's a behavioral scientist. He says, the familiar childhood admonition of counting to 10 before taking action works because it emphasizes 2 things. 1, time, and the other, distraction. Here's what I want to suggest. That you don't necessarily have to count to 10 to remind you to get God involved, but I want you to consider 10 words instead of 10 numbers. Here's what I mean. 10 words that we're all very familiar with. Say this the next time you start to feel that anger boiling up inside you. 10 words we all know well. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. 10 words. Just to cause you to pause long enough to remind yourself, God, I want to invite you into this moment of my frustration to help me manage it in a more healthy way so I don't end up with a wake of damage in my relationships. Here's the second one. First one, get God involved. Number 2, stop with the excuses. Knock it off with the excuses. Because here's what we do when we get angry and we let loose and we explode over someone for something stupid. Look what we say, and you'll have heard this before. Look at what you made me do. How familiar is that? We want to take our response, which is way out of whack with what the offense was, and blame it on someone else, and we rationalize it away as like it makes sense. Friends, we've got to stop with the excuses, or we're going to be left with nothing when it comes to our relationships. Again, look at Solomon, what he says here in Proverbs 28. He who conceals his sin does not prosper. You're not going to be successful managing your life that way by concealing it and try to blame someone else and putting it out of the way and trying to hide the way you manage your anger or rationalizing it. Whoever confesses and renounces their sins, they're going to be the ones who find mercy. Solomon's saying, don't ignore it, don't stuff it, don't bury it, deal with it, own it, so that you can really get to the root of your problem. Third one. So get God involved, stop with the excuses. Third one, avoid angry people. Why? Why should I avoid angry people? Because, friends, anger is contagious. When you spend time with other angry people, or how about this, not just other angry people, how about consuming angry media? When you spend time with that stuff or with those people, what does it do? What does it do to you emotionally? It spins us up, doesn't it? It fires us up, and we end up walking away from that conversation with that angry person or from that consumption of that kind of media, and we come back and we walk into our other relationships, and we're not prepared for what that's done to us, and we immediately go into angry mode over the smallest, dumbest things. This is what Solomon says about this stuff. Proverbs 22, he says, do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Don't associate with someone who's easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. And we like to think sometimes, well, no, I've got this one under control. I'm good. I've been real good for quite a while now, so I could spend some time with them, and maybe, just maybe, I could be the one to influence them this time. No. We usually end up in those conversations with those people, consuming that kind of content, worse off than when we started. And here's another thing that Solomon says about spending time with those kind of people. Proverbs 19, a hot-tempered man, they're going to pay the penalty, because if you rescue him, you're going to have to do it again. What's that mean? It means that anger is repetitive. It's like it's addictive. It's going to happen again and again once you have this problem. And it's sometimes when we blow up on people, here's why anger is addictive. Because sometimes when we blow up on people, it feels good, doesn't it? Especially when we believe we're right. When we believe at the core of our being that we're right and they're wrong, it just makes that explosion feel that much more gratifying. Oh, that was so good, right? Some of you need to hear this morning. I want you to pay close attention to what I'm about to say. Just because you believe that you're right, it does not give you license to blow up on someone. Do you hear me? Just because you believe you're right, it does not give you license to explode over your family, your friends, that coworker. Solomon's saying you're going to pay a dear penalty for that kind of behavior and that kind of living. It's going to ruin your relationships. Here's the last piece of advice. Get God involved. Stop with the excuses. Avoid angry people. And speak softly. Here's what Solomon says about this. A gentle answer turns away wrath. But a harsh word, what does it do? It just stirs up more anger. That's why, friends, we should learn to speak softly when we're angry, as a cue for us and for others that we're ready to really deal with it. Anger can be such a difficult thing to manage, especially when we've been handling it in an unhealthy way for years. And it has a ripple effect on our families that just causes more pain. Reminds me of a friend that I grew up with. He was really closer to my brother Dave. His name is Paul. And I always wondered why Paul would spend time with our family over the holidays instead of his own. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, he'd show up and spend most of the day and night with us. I wondered that until he sent me this email. Let me read it for you. Paul wrote this when I asked him about it. He said, my mom and dad were married for about 12 years. And my mom told me that Dad never hit her until the day they got married. She said that it continued every day until they got divorced. My dad definitely has some anger issues, which were indeed passed down to me and my brother. I don't remember too much from when they were married, but my brother does. He got some whoopings. The anger has for sure been passed down to me, because I'll notice if I was playing a video game with my friends, that was one thing, but when I was alone and trying to beat this crazy game and something stupid would happen, I'd get ticked. And when I was younger, I would throw the indestructible Nintendo controller and break things in the house. I threw it and broke my dresser back in junior high from throwing it so hard. But then I got older, and I was able, with enough strength, to twist it and snap these game controllers in my hands. Went through too many to count. And I know that video games is a lame explanation, he says, but even now, Erin, my wife, gets upset when I play too long because my temper usually gets the best of me. Nowadays, I get so mad at stuff, simple things, that I won't do things around the house, like fix something that I know is broken and I should fix because I know it's going to be difficult and piss me off. And it sucks, and I know what's happening, but I can't beat it because I just get too angry, he says. Anger affects me at work too. I drive trucks. My regular run is from Montgomery, New York to Philly, and then I go back to New York. But when the company asks me to divert and go to Harrisburg and then go home, it angers me so much. I get my mindset on going home, and then I've got to change plans. And I don't even have any plans at home, but I get angry anyway. And it goes through my mind over and over, and thinking about it gets me more mad. And when I worked at a previous company, this other driver summed it up by saying, I was going to be the guy to bring a shotgun to work and then kill everyone and then myself. But I would never do that, of course. I would never do that. But that job got to me. Dude, Thanksgiving with your family is what it's supposed to be. I don't even bother going to my family's house during the holidays. Between my dad and uncle busting on everyone all evening, forget it. So we go to Aaron's family and then spend the time at your place the majority of the day or the evening. We didn't even get together this year. My dad and stepmother came over for about 45 minutes the day after Christmas. Howard Stern says, my dad didn't like me. He doesn't want to spend time with me. And I know exactly what he means. It's not that his dad doesn't like him. He's just that his dad doesn't want to be bothered. We haven't had dinner together in over a year. There's a lot of anger. The only thing I'm trying to do differently is the way I'm raising my kids. And I've already done more with my daughter than my dad did with me throughout my whole life. I sometimes think my nickname should be Pop, for Pissed Off Paul. Friends, we don't have to tell others to deal with it when we explode. We need to be the ones to deal with it. And we need to be the ones to deal with it because God was willing to deal with us. Even when we don't want to deal with ourselves, God is still willing to deal with us. And maybe you're here this morning and you haven't been ready to deal with yourself in a long time. And it might be because you haven't surrendered yourself completely to Jesus. And I want you to consider, there's a card in your program. It's a baptism decision card. We're going to have a baptism service next week. And maybe you're ready. Maybe you've been here a while and you're ready now to completely surrender and start dealing with it. And if that's you, I want you to fill out that card in this communion moment we're about to have. And take the card to an usher before you go. Hand it to them on your way out. And how do we know that God was willing to deal with us, even when we don't want to deal with ourselves? We know it from something that Peter wrote. Look it up on the screen, 1 Peter chapter 2. He says, He himself, Jesus, He himself bore our sins in His body on the cross so that we might die to our sin and live for righteousness. By His wounds we've been healed. Friends, maybe it's time for you to start dying to your sin and living for righteousness. That's the right thing. Living to do the right thing and deal with it. In just a moment, the ushers will pass the trays containing the bread and the cup as we remember together. Take one of each item and hold on to it. And we'll eat and drink in just a moment.